Okay, guys, so today's class is about conditionals. Keep in mind, guys, that when I say conditionals, I mean the cause and the effect. Okay? So, for example, if you do something, this thing will happen. So, the cause and the effect is about conditionals. Okay. Keep in mind, guys, that we have four rules about using conditionals. I'm going to explain these rules. Please keep them in your mind all the time because you need them just to use conditionals in writing and even in speaking. Okay. Now, let me show you the next page and let me show you the four rules of conditionals. Now, the first rule is the zero conditional. Now, the zero conditional uh, um, talks about two clauses. The first clause is the if clause. Absolutely, it's not a must to use if all the time. We can use when. Absolutely, I can show you some examples. So, this is the if clause, and the second clause is the main clause. Now, the zero conditional uh, um, is saying that if you want to use if, as I told you, or when, because both conjunctions have the same meaning, when or if. Okay, so now, if you want to use when or if and the simple present tense in the if clause, now in the main clause, you have to use simple present tense again. Let me show you a certain example. I'm going to write the easiest example about conditionals, and I'm not going to change it for the fully understanding of conditionals. Now, the example is saying if you study, okay, comma, you pass the exam, you pass the exam. Okay, now let me try to show you the rule again concerning this example. So this is the if that we have in the if clause. The simple present tense study is in the simple present tense. This is the comma to separate the if clause from the main clause. This is the comma. This is the simple present again, and past is in the simple present. So this sentence is in zero conditional. Okay. Now rule number two is about the first conditional. Now the first conditional we have, if you want to use if in the if clause, and the tense is the simple present tense. Okay. Now in the main clause, you have to use will plus infinitive or verb zero, the base form of the verb. Let me show you and let me explain this rule in this example. Again, I'm not going to change the example. So if you study, you will pass the exam. You will pass the exam. Okay, now let me show you the rule with the example. So notice that here we have if. In the example here we have if. As I told you, I can use when. The simple present tense, so notice that study is in the simple present tense. Now this is the comma to separate the if clause from the main clause. And here we have will, this is will. After that, I have to use infinitive or verb zero. So pass is in verb zero, or as I told you, as infinitive. Okay, now I have to show you the next rule of conditionals. Now the third rule is the second conditionals. Now if you want to use if in the if clause, as I told you, or maybe when, now you have to use the simple past tense. In the main clause, you have to use would plus infinitive or verb zero. So let me write the example. Again, I'm not going to change the example. After writing the examples, I'm going to show you the difference between them. So if you studied okay, comma, you would pass the exam. You would pass the exam. Okay, so we notice that in the example we have if, so this is if in the second conditional, simple past tense, absolutely the past of a study is studied. Now this is the comma to separate the two clauses. Absolutely here we have would, this is would, and the verb zero or infinitive is pass again, which is the base form. Now I have to show you the last rule of using conditionals, which is the third conditional. Now I have to write an example just to show you the meaning of this rule. So if you had studied, okay, comma, you would have passed the exam. Okay. So notice that the last rule, which is the third rule of conditionals, is saying if you want to use if or when in the if clause, this is it. Here we have past perfect tense. Now the past perfect of the verb study is what is had plus verb 3 or past participle. The past participle or the verb 3 of study is studied. So had, which is the past. Now perfect is verb 3, and the verb 3 of study is studied. So this is in the if clause. Now in the main clause, we have would. This is would. Plus have. This is have. Plus past participle or verb 3. So this is the past participle, which is past. So these are the four rules of conditionals. Please don't forget them because absolutely you have to remember them and you have to use them correctly. Okay. Now, some students asked me this question, teacher, what is the difference between sentence number one and sentence number two? What is the difference if I want to say, if you study, you pass the exam, or if you study, you will pass the exam? Keep in mind, please, guys, that I have to use the zero conditional if I'm talking about facts, okay? Or if I'm talking about things cannot be changed, things which are fixed, okay? Let me show you a certain example about a fact. Let me show you this page. Wait. Wait, give me a minute just to show you the page or example. This is it. Okay. So notice, guys, the example is saying if you put a stone in water, it sinks. Or as I told you, I can use when, because when or if, these two conjunctions have the same meaning. Okay? Absolutely, the meaning is not going to be changed if you want to use when or maybe if. So, if, this is if, this is the simple present tense, this is the comma to separate the two clauses, and this is the simple present tense. I added s absolutely with the pronouns of he, she, it, or any singular noun in the simple present tense. So notice that this is a fact. Absolutely all the time, if you want to throw a stone in water, it sinks. Whatever, let me say that maybe the stone is really big or small, but every time if you want to throw or put a stone in water, it sinks all the time. If you want to say, guys, if you put a stone in water, it will sinks. Notice that will is talking about temporal things, things that are temporarily, okay? Or let me say not that are temporally, or not fixed, or I can say that they are changeable. Let me explain this example. We notice that if you study, you will pass the exam. I know some students study very well, or let me say studied very well in the past, but they wouldn't pass the exam. So this is not a fact. Okay? So please, as I told you, because the verb will is the verb of probability. Maybe yes, maybe no. So it's not about certainty. It's not a fact. It's not something which is fixed. So all the time, if I'm talking about facts or things that are fixed, I have to use the uh, uh, zero conditional all the time. Please be careful. Okay. Now, I want to ask you a question and you have to tell me the answer. Wait. Okay. Notice, guys, in this sentence we have, if you study, you will pass the exam. Now, what if I want to say, you will pass the exam, you will pass the exam if you study, if you study. Now, guys, you notice that I wrote the if clause at the end, but I wrote the main clause in the beginning of the sentence. So notice that here we have, you will pass the exam, and here we have, you will pass the exam. Here we have, if you study, and here we have, if you study. Now, the question is, do they have the same meaning? Absolutely, the answer is yes. So, if you want to start your sentence with the main clause or with if clause, absolutely, both ways are correct because both of them have the same meaning. But be careful about something. If you want to start your sentence with a conjunction, with if or when or maybe because is acceptable, you have to write the comma. But if you want to write the conjunction in the middle of the sentence, please don't write a comma at all. Okay? This rule is really important, especially in writing, because in speaking, no one knows if you are using the comma or maybe the full stop, but in writing, absolutely, they will know. Let me show you this example. So, please take a look at this example. This example is saying if the wind blows, okay, the trees move. So keep in mind that this is a fact. And because it is a fact, I use simple present, simple present. So this is the zero conditional with facts. Okay. And notice that I can start my sentence with with a certain conjunction like if, when, or because, and I can write this conjunction in the middle of the sentence and notice that both of them have the same meaning. But if I want to start my sentence with if or when, so notice that here I have to write the comma. But if I want to write the conjunction in the middle, I don't have to write the comma at all. So please be careful because this is really important. Okay. Now, please let me tell you that the zero conditional and the first conditional are real and possible to happen. But the second conditional and the third one are impossible to happen. Let me show you this page because you have to understand me. Yeah. This is it. Okay. So again, the zero conditional and the first conditional are possible to be happened, but the second and the third rule are impossible to be happened. If you want to ask me why, because guys, notice that if I want to say, if you study, you will pass the exam, the action doesn't start yet, and this action is going to be started in the future. But if you want to say, if you studied, you would pass the exam, this is something already happened. And notice that I didn't pass the exam. I failed and I didn't study. I cannot change anything. Okay? So this is why the second and the third rule are called unreal or impossible to be happened. Now, listen to me carefully because I want to say something which is really important. Keep in mind, guys, that in the second and the third example, you have to use the verb to be were all the time. When I say all the time, I mean with all pronouns, okay? With I, with you, with we, with they, with he, with she, with it, okay? With all pronouns, please, you have to use were, don't use was at all. So I, you, we, they, with he, with she, with it. I know, guys, that in the normal rule, with the pronouns of I, he, she, it, I have to use was. But please, only with the second and the third conditionals, and even with wishes, I have to use were. The verb to be should be were. Please don't use was. Even if you are talking about singular nouns and plural nouns. So with all nouns and pronouns, again, I have to use what? Were. Please, this is really important. Okay. Now again, let's go back to the rule because I want to tell you something that my students asked me before. Some students asked me, teacher, in the first conditional, shall I use will all the time? Is it a must to use will all the time? The answer is no. To be honest, I can use some modal verbs. Not only I have to use will, but I can use can instead of will. I can use could, I can use may, I can use might, I can use should, I can use shall. Okay, I can use shall. But absolutely, I cannot use must. Please don't use must because must, I don't have a choice. Okay, but notice, as I told you, that well is talking about probability, but must is not talking about probability. I don't have a choice, but well, I have a choice. Okay, so notice that I can use will, I can use can, could, may, might, shall, should. It is up to you, but I mean, it's not a must all the time just to use will. You're free to use one of these modal verbs. And absolutely, with all modal verbs, guys, after all modal verbs, I have to use what? Verb zero or infinitive. Please be careful because this is really important. Now, let me show you the last rule of using conditionals. Now, keep in mind, guys, and be careful if you want to use unless. Because if you want to use unless, you have to delete if and you have to delete the negative. Okay? Be careful. Let me show you this example. This example is saying, if you don't get an invitation, you can't come to the party. So notice that unless you get an invitation, you can't come to the party. So notice that because I want to use unless, I have to delete if plus not or plus negative. So notice that unless you get, not you don't. Keep in mind that I used the verb to do because I'm talking about negative in the simple present. In the simple present with negative, I have to use what do and does. In the simple past, I have to use did. But absolutely, if you want to use only the main verb, you don't have to use the auxiliary. So unless you get, so I deleted don't with if. Unless you get an invitation, you can't come to the party. Don't delete, guys, all the nuts in the sentence. Only the nut that is in the if clause. Okay? So please, again, be careful. Only the nut that is with the if clause should be deleted. Okay? Not all the nuts in the sentence. So notice that here cannot. I didn't delete the negative at all. Only in the if clause. So notice this is a comma. Before that, this is the if clause. So I have to delete the negative, which is this. Okay? So please be careful. Again, this is extremely important. Okay. So this is about conditionals. Now, please, guys, I need you to watch the next video because the next video is about the mixed conditionals. Okay. After that, after explaining and recording the mixed conditionals, I want to explain the inverted conditionals. So all these videos, inverted, are about conditionals, inverted conditionals. And absolutely all of them are extremely important. Okay? Thank you so much. And let me wish a good day for you. Bye bye.